measurements for our stuff. And do you guys remember how big I told you your letters were going to be? Uppercase were going to be 2.5 inches, and your lowercase were going to be 1 3/4 inches, okay? Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to try and tie this in with a little bit of math on here. And we're going to have this, and we're going to figure out how to get that 2.5 inches in the middle of our paper. That's our next goal for this. So if we have, does anybody know how big a standard sheet of paper is? 8.5 by 11. Copy paper is all 8.5 by 11, which can be handy to know that you can know that a piece of paper is almost a foot when you're trying to measure something, let's say. All right, so if we have 8.5 by 11, and I told you we want to put 2.5 inches in the middle of it, how do we start to figure out how to do that? What would the measurements be? So if we know that this space right here is 8.5 inches, okay? I have 8.5 inches, and I'd like to get 2.5 inches in the middle of that paper, right? I don't know that we would divide by 4. One of the things that we're going to start off with was we know, okay, if we're going to write an algebraic equation, we know it equals 8.5, right? Right? And I got 2.5 that does something in there. Right? So if I have 2.5 somewhere in there, and we need to figure out what the other two parts of that are, correct? So we need to figure out what the other two parts are. So if I'm looking for half of this, and I want it in the middle, so we know that there's going to be 2 equal parts on each side of it, right? So here we know we have 2 1/2 here, right? But we don't know what this is, right? So if we get into this whole algebraic thing and everybody's like saying, what do I need that for? Well, this is kind of a prime example of why you might need this, right? So what plus 2.5 equals 8.5?
What, plus 2.5?
Right, so I've got x and 2.5 and x, and all of that is going to be 8.5, right? So how do we finish writing this equation off? Right? So if we got 2x plus 2.5, so I got 1x, 2x plus 2.5 equals 8.5. You see that? This is why you learned algebra, people. This is the kind of application that it does serve for. I know that probably these things don't happen that often, but it may, and that's why we need to know it. Okay? So now what are we going to do? How do we start breaking down this equation? Subtract 2.5 from each side, right? So then we get 6.5 equals 2x, right? So 2x equals 2x equals what? 6, right? Then what do I do to break down that equation even more? Divide each side by 2, and I get, what is that? 3. So x equals 3, right? So we know we have 3 inches on either side of 2.5 inches at that point, correct? Now, the next part's where we get a little bit trickier and we get into reading the ruler. And that sometimes is hard, but it's another skill that we have to do, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my ruler so that the 0 is right here, right? Now, if I measure down my ruler, what am I going to mark at right now? 3 inches. Excellent. So I have 3 inches right here. And we do know that quotation marks means inches, right? An apostrophe means feet, quotation marks means inches, because again, these are standard things that if you don't know it, you don't necessarily know it, okay? So my first measurement's going to be at 3. What's my next measurement that I'm going to mark at going to be? 3 plus 2.5 is what? 5.5. So we're going to do it at 5 1/2 inches, okay? Now the other thing that we talked about is I'm going to do my middle line for my lowercase letters. And that middle part here, and Ayana, what did I say that middle part was going to be at? How big were my lowercase letters going to be?
2.5.
2.5 is going to be my uppercase letters. My lowercase letters are going to be 1 3/4 inches. All right, so now we got a little bit of trickiness going on here too, right? If I have this mark at 3 and this mark at 5.5, does anybody, can you guess where I should put that mark? Huh? So what we have here is we have 2 and a half minus 1 3/4, right? So that what would this measurement be? This is 2 and 2/4, right? Minus 1 3/4, so it's going to be less than a whole inch. Okay, let's do it this way, and this sometimes is easier too. If this is $1.75, right? Because that is 1 3/4, so we know that's $1.75, right? And you got $2.50 or $2.50. How much change are you going to get back? Huh? If somebody says something is $1.75 and I give them $2.50, if I give them $2.50, how much change am I going to get back? 75 cents, which is how many quarters? 3/4. So this space right in here is going to be 3/4. Do you see how sometimes with the quarters you can, like in the halves, you can sit there and you can try and put it into money, and it kind of does make a little bit more sense that way. Now, we know we're at 3/4, so what is this measurement going to be marked at? When we marked it at 3, we're going to mark it at 3/4 from there, so it's going to be at 3 and. If it's 1/4 of an inch away, or 3/4 of an inch away from 3, where are we going to mark it at? 3 and, oh good Lord, 3 3/4, people. Right? On the ruler. So one of the things we're going to have to be able to do is we're going to have to be able to identify on multiple rulers what is 3 3/4, and what is 5 1/2. All right? Now when you're going to mark stuff off on a piece of paper, you want to make sure it's all straight. So one of the things you're going to do is you are going to mark it, now that we got all the algebra done, we're going to mark our paper. We're going to mark it here at 3 inches, then at 3 3/4, and then at 5 1/2. And we're making sure that our ruler is set up at the 0 line, because that's a big thing too, and I'll show you that later on. But then we're going to go halfway to the other side of the paper because 11 inches is long. We're going to go to the other side of the paper, and we are going to mark it again at 3 inches, 3 3/4, and 5 1/2. And you will have both of these measurements set up on there. Because if you don't, what ends up happening is when you go to draw a line, 9 times out of 10, you're going to draw a slope. What's a slope? It kind of goes up or down, right? So if you have these 2 marks on here and you line them up when you're drawing your ruler, odds are you are going to get everything in the middle of that paper. Now, how big is this space right here? 3 inches. Very good. And this space down here? 3 inches. So we got 2.5 inches in the middle of that paper. All right? When you show me your papers, they will line up, and you will line it up with one that I've done. You will be able to see that there are 2 kinds of measurement marks on here and that you have used the ruler to do this. All right? And like I said, this is one of those things that a lot of people struggle with. Finding 3/4 of an inch and 1/2 an inch sometimes is a little bit more difficult than we think it is until you get used and practice to doing this, okay? But I gotta tell you, it's important. All right, thank you.